Of all the leadership lessons I learned from my dad, one of the most impactful in my life as a minister of the gospel is to finish what you start. My dad was not a big fan of people getting a great start and quitting somewhere along the way. I want to look at that from Scripture today, the idea of finishing, but what does it really mean to finish, and how do we know when we're finished with one thing and it's time to move on to the next? How do we know when we finished one project and it's time to move to the next? How do we know when we finished one piece of work, one day of work, one season of work, and we can go into the next season? I want to look at 3 verses in Genesis chapter 2, verses 1, 2, and 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day, God finished His work that He had done, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work that He had done. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that He had done in creation. All right, there's the idea in this text, several times the word finished. But there's also, it bleeds into this idea of rest. Now, to understand this scripture, I used to think, wait a minute, God finished creation on the 6th day. This gets a little bit confusing because, in my opinion, the chapter mark is in the wrong place. This break, the 3 verses we just read, seems to me they are more connected to the creation story in chapter 1. And then verse 4 marks a break where, if you're going to put chapters 2, seems like it should have started there, where it says, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, or this is the account of, the NIV says. But I think because it's separated from verse 31, sometimes the clarity, that becomes a stopping point for us, unfortunately, and we don't read on. So if we're reading what God did on day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, and so in day 6, in verse 31, chapter 1, it tells us the creation, and then thus, chapter 2, verse 1, the heavens and the earth were finished. That's day 6. They were finished, and all the host of them. And verse 2, on the 7th day, God finished His work that He had done. Wait a minute. Verse 1, speaking of day 6, says He finished. I thought He always thought He finished on the 6th day and rested on the 7th. But then it says here, speaking of the 7th day, on the 7th day, God finished. He finished on the 6th and He finished on the 7th. If He finished on the 6th, what work was left to do on the 7th? What is this work that He finished on the 7th? We know what He finished on the 6th because He explains it clearly. We know what He finished on the 5th, on the 4th, on the 3rd. But what did He have to finish on the 7th? What work was there to do? On the 7th day, God finished His work that He had done, and He rested on the 7th day from all His work that He had done. Here's what I get out of this. You're not fully finished until you rest. The work was not finished until God rested. We live in a world where so-called successful leaders brag about not taking a day off ever, and they brag about either not doing vacation or doing work on vacation when their family's not watching, or they brag about it becomes sort of a badge of honor to sleep 4 hours a night and work 70 or 80 hours a week, although they don't really do that, but they just say that because we honor that kind of thing. But God's not like that. God worked 6 days and rested on the 7th. The rest was part of the job. The rest was part of the work. Before we move on to next, we finish what we started by resting. Now, this scripture also tells us what rest is. Rest is not just not doing anything. Rest is not doing things that amuse us. So think about that word a minute, amuse. The prefix negates what comes next. Muse is to think deeply. So amusement is to not think at all. Is to negate any kind of brain process in thinking. Is to be passively consuming something. It's not that that's always bad, but amusement is not necessarily rest. So this idea of rest is connected in this text to what it means to finish. We work, we are finished after we've done the work and rest. Now we're ready for what's next. The next conference, the next sermon, the next ministry outreach, the next mission, the next video, the next whatever next is for us. We go at it with much more energy and creativity and expectation and hope and joy if we go into it rested. Now, what is rest? Verse 3 tells us clearly, so God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it God rested from all His work. What does that tell us? Number one, rest is blessed. Okay, I'm not rhyming that on purpose, but rest is blessed. God blessed this day of rest. What does it mean that it's blessed? What does that even mean? I was talking with someone a couple of days ago, a non-American, an international, and trying to explain Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, for the non-Americans watching this, it is a chicken restaurant. And the founder of that restaurant, Truett Cathy, he's passed away now, was a very dedicated Christian believer. He gave millions of dollars to ministry projects and to help the poor and all types of things. And he was a real believer in Sabbath rest. So when he started his first restaurant, the very first one just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, he closed on Sundays. As now there are thousands of these Chick-fil-A's all over, they are still closed on Sunday. But here's what's interesting, is that current data shows that the average weekly income of the average Chick-fil-A versus the average McDonald's, the Chick-fil-A outsells it in actual money made more than double. So think about this. Chick-fil-A restaurant, McDonald's restaurant. Chick-fil-A's working 6 days, McDonald's working 7 days, and Chick-fil-A is earning double the amount per square foot in the restaurant. My point is this, the scripture tells us rest is a blessing. Now, I'm not implying, and scripture isn't, that your restaurant is going to make double the next restaurant if you observe the Sabbath. But the point is, this owner was deeply committed to that day of rest and observing a day off and not working. But what the scripture tells us, not only is this day blessed, this day of rest, but also, he says, he made it holy. When we think about holy things, we think of things that we need to take seriously. Something that God says is holy is something that we take seriously, not just flippantly. When God says something is holy, it means it's very important. It's not insignificant. When God says something is holy, it means it's spiritual. There's a spiritual side to it. And all of that applies to rest. Rest is something we should take seriously. Rest is something that is very important. Rest is something that is very spiritual. And maybe because we don't do rest properly, it seems less than spiritual. But there's a holy, important aspect to rest because God made it holy. So this scripture tells us rest is blessed by God. Rest is holy before God. And thirdly, it says because on it God rested. God rested. Rest is godly. It's not worldly. It's not just something that we do for ourselves. If God did it, it's godly, and He expects us to do it. So my challenge here is we're into a new year. Some of us need to change the way we go about our work. We need to work hard, and then we need to take rest very seriously because it is a blessed thing and a holy thing and a godly thing. And so I want to encourage you, think about your rhythms of work and rest, and let's treat it as something holy before God in this new year.